This is Christian in the flesh.
In the past that has shaped like who you are today?
Oh gosh, yeah.
And you can ramble, it's fine. Like you can say whatever.
I feel that I find myself talking about this a lot, and I almost get frustrated with myself about it, that it's sort of the go-to story that I tell, but my mother was probably one of the most formative figures of my life, both in mostly in bad ways, but in a lot of good ways too. My relationship with her was just incredibly strained. I mean, she had my sister at 18 and then had me at 21, and she had her whole life experience of sexual abuse trauma and physical abuse trauma and emotional abuse trauma and neglect and abandonment, and like, I think having kids, having never addressed or healed any of that, and then suddenly you have 2 kids, it's like, it's a recipe for some sort of disaster. I mean, like, you can only do the best that you can, and she really did the best that she could, but I just remember so many moments. It was like a strange roller coaster ride with her growing up. Like, there would be a lot of really beautiful peaks, and then there would be so many, like, horrifying lows, and my high school experience was, I mean, she was a single mother for most of her life. My dad didn't really care all that much about like me or my sister, and so she married a couple of times to like physically abusive men who were really terrible to both us and her, and she divorced her second husband when I was in high school, and she was alone for a while, and it just got really weird, you know, like she was a nurse, that was her trade, she was a hospice nurse, so she always had this sort of, I always thought it was really odd that like her career was to like help people into death, like that was a very strange thing, and I often accompanied her to the houses of her patients, and I would sit with them, and it would be like,
wow.
They would be so enamored. It was so strange because it's like they were literally at the end of their days and I was just at the beginning of mine, so there was this strange, I don't know, it was like they could see, I was like a glimpse into like the other side where their energy would be like recycled and they would start over in some capacity. So that was really beautiful, but I don't think she ever really saw that side of it. I think she just saw the side of it that required her to be finally needed by someone fully, and she got injured on the job, like lifting up a patient, and my freshman year of high school got diagnosed with this strange disease called degenerative disc disease, which basically like the discs in your lower back just start to disintegrate into sand, and so they say that you'll be totally crippled by 42 years old, and she was like 36 at the time. So the clock was ticking, and she basically became bedbound, and from there she sort of developed this really specific narcotic pain medication addiction. And I came to find out like many years later that she had struggled with it really intensely in her youth and had been in and out of rehab, and I never knew any of that. But she struggled really intensely with it, and it created this alter ego personality that would come out like in the middle of the night, where she would be in like the peak of a high, and I mean, like, graphic details would be like, there would be many nights where I'd be asleep in my bed and I would wake up to her like hitting me in the face with a wire hanger, like just because she was so out of it, and it was so scary. I mean, it was so scary, and she would walk around the neighborhood in the middle of the night with all of her clothes off, and I would get a call from the neighbor being like, your mom's here, come and get her. And I'm still going to high school at this time, like I'm still having to wake up every day. So it was really, yeah, there were a lot of really scary moments with her, and I felt like I got to this place where I was just angry that I didn't get to live a life. Like my life had already been taken away because I was having to parent a parent.
Yeah.
And So when I went to college after my freshman year of college, she committed suicide, and it was the best thing that could have ever happened, both to me and to her. And that is such a weird sentence to like say about the topic, but
Yeah.
she was in so much pain, and I was in so much pain because of her being in so much pain. And you know, it's like my family was super poor growing up. We didn't have any money. Like, there were no resources to go to a drug rehab and like fix yourself and heal. Like, that just wasn't accessible, and it wasn't accessible to me yet either, because I hadn't found like magic in its fullest form. You know, I only knew what I had seen on television and what I had experienced myself. So her passing, and then me being able to sort of finally grieve, because it's like, you know, when someone's sick, you know that it's coming. You know that the end is coming at some point. And I knew it was coming for a long time, and I was like patiently awaiting the phone call, I suppose, and I got it over summer when I was working a summer job. And it was devastating, of course. I mean, this August is 8 years since it happened, and I can't believe that. Like, it feels like such a long time, but it also feels like yesterday. And
Yeah.
that experience, my experience with her growing up, it both traumatized me and made me probably the most resilient person that I know. Like, I almost never give up unless it's very specifically pointed for me to. Like, I'm always gonna push as hard as I can until there's a resolution. And yeah, I mean, I'm very nurturing because of her, because I had to nurture her as an adult, and she was like an adult baby in a lot of ways, and I was an adult child, you know. So my experience with her was really profoundly sad. Like, I learned so much from it, and I'm finally at a place now where I can look back and not be trapped in the anger side of it, that I could just be like, okay, this is part of my story. It's not the only part of my story, it's not the story, but it's like, it happened, and I don't need to feel shame about it anymore. I can figure out the lessons and the reasons why, and the greater meaning, as opposed to the constant, like, waking up every day feeling the most intense grief. Like, that's finally gone, and that's nice. That's a relief.
Yeah. Is there anything key in your healing process that you can point out for anyone that may be going through the same situation, like dealing with an ill parent or dealing with losing a parent, or just grief in general? Because I know it's not an overnight process, and I know there's a lot that goes into inner healing. So can you just kind of paint a picture of what that looked like for you?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I tend to not try. I tend to try to not prescribe like a remedy for grief, because my grief, the way that I healed through my grief, was extremely shocking to some people. Like, my tendency is to become incredibly introverted and alone, and I wanted to basically like cocoon myself and be like, okay, I know that I will be over this at some point. And I think that's the trick with grief. You know, you can sort of grieve however you want, but the only important thing is to know that it's temporary. The sensation is temporary.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I said to myself all the time, is like, I know that I am in the most pain I've ever been in right now, but I know that it won't be like that forever, because each day it did get better, and some days it was worse than the day before, but ultimately, like, the puzzle is slowly getting put together. And I mean, I think like going back, the introspection was really beautiful for me, because it caused me to really listen to what was happening, and through that deep listening, I felt like I heard a lot of messages that were specifically being said to me in an experience. Like, I took this really bizarre energy workshop when I was living in New York, and this guy was like walking around the room and like touching people, and they were like, his claim was that he had so much energy running through his body that he could like charge people up and they would like pass out. And he was walking around like touching all these people, and they were like dropping to the floor like flies. It was the most bizarre thing. And I was I'm extremely magical, and I love magic, and I do all things magical.
Yeah.
But I am the biggest skeptic. Like I
Yeah.
will always be a skeptic until I know like there's truth inside of it.
Right.
And so I'm literally sitting there like, this is all bullshit. Like there's no way that this is real. And sure enough, he came around and touched me, and like 2 hours later, I woke up on the floor. So I'm not sure what happened or what it was, but the profound aspect of it was after the course happened, he sat at the front of the room and he was like, you can ask me any question about anything except for what just happened. And I was like, ugh.
Oh my God.
Of course, that's the one question I want to ask. But this woman raised her hand and she was like, my best friend is dying of breast cancer right now, and she's definitely not going to survive. What's the best way that I can send healing to her? And my heart like sort of fluttered for a second. I was like, oh God. And this was maybe a year after my mom had passed away. Like it was relatively soon-ish in the grand scheme of it. And he sort of looked at her and he was like, very softly, he was like, you know, sometimes death is the healing. Like sometimes death is the only way that people can heal. And I sobbed like for days over that, and it became like a strange mantra in a way. And I thought that was really interesting considering my mom's like hospice nurse background. It's like death quite literally is the only healing in that situation. And if we are to believe that there is a life past the one that we're living right now, or at least a space, it doesn't even need to be defined. It's just like there's something else after this, no matter what it is, then death is the healing. Death is a doorway. Death is a space for someone to walk through to shift their form into something else. And that's probably the one thing that helped me grieve the most. Like it was that saying, it was that moment, because I think with grief, there's a moment where there's almost like a moment where you decide to take it personally in a way. Like my mom passing away was like, fuck, she left me. Like she left me and now I'm here by myself. And it's like, it's not about you at the end of the day. It has nothing to do with you. If someone dies via suicide or by getting in a car accident or by having a heart attack, like it's all perfect, unfortunately. Like that's the one thing that I do know. Like it's all supposed to be that way, and we can choose to learn from it or we can choose to be in pain. And sometimes the pain is the learning, you know, sometimes the pain is the lesson. And like I thought when she was alive, my threshold for pain was at its maximum, but then when she died, it grew tenfold. And I was able to grieve bigger and harder and grieve for her and for myself and for my inner child and for my sister and for my dad and for her parents and for my family tree who had experienced the same traumas that she had. And she was just sort of the catalyst to break the cycle in every way. I mean, I think about it a lot, and I almost think I'm like, when she died, it felt like there was some sort of like power that like passed to me. And now, you know, it's like she gave up her life force in order for it to come to me. And now, so I think like through grief, honor is like one of the best things that you can do. And that's it, you know, you just have to honor what's come before and you have to honor what comes next as equally as you do the other. And most importantly, honoring the present. Like, where are you right now? Where are you in this moment right now? Are you in pain? If you are, stay in bed that day if you can. If you can't, then find a way to make it worthwhile. I mean, I hate that we live in this culture where people have to have the 9-to-5 moment and they can't actually take more than a week off to grieve. I think that's absolute madness, and I feel fortunate to be able to work in an industry where I can sort of do what I need to do when I need to do it.
Right.
But if you're not in a situation like that, then I think just like making rituals is really nice. Like taking time to make very conscious life choices and developments about like how you choose to interact with space and time. You know, like if you have to work a 9-to-5 job and you come home and you're feeling immense grief, do something.
Yeah.
Do something that takes even the edge off of that sensation, you know, like, and sometimes it's sleep. I slept so much the first like 2 or 3 years. I just slept and slept and slept. And my grandmother's like, "Are you sick? Like, do you have mono? Like, are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm fine. I just know in my soul that I need to sleep." And that was that. You just have to be kind to yourself, and no matter what comes up. And the hard part for a lot of people, I think, is that grief and addiction often come hand in hand, and it comes into place where people want to numb themselves out of the pain. And you know, I don't condone that by any means.
It's okay.
This is my familiar here. I don't condone that by any means, but I think that people just need to do what they need to do, and they need to know that there's always time to fix it afterwards. Like, there's no permanent decision that you make to where you don't get to still live a happy life, you know, like there's no death sentence unless it is, you know.
Right.
So I just think however grief comes up for you, and however I mean, losing a parent is never easy, especially when you've experienced trauma. And like, for me, the big thing that came up is like, I want to yell and scream at her, and I want to tell her how much pain she put me in when I was a kid. I want to tell her like how much she hurt me and how terrible of a parent that she was. But like, what would that have done, you know? You tell me. All right, you get down. It wouldn't have done anything. It wouldn't have solved anything. It wouldn't have brought me any more healing than it would have brought her pain, you know?
Yeah.
And I think recognizing that and being like, okay, the point of it was not to get an apology. The point of it was not to even tell my truth in that moment. It was just to learn how to let love come and go from your life freely and not control it in any capacity. Like, I feel like we say this a lot, like, if you love something, you can't control it at the same time. You just need to let it be what it's going to be.
Oh my God, thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course.
What don't you want to tell people but know you should share because it will help someone else? I know that's hard for you because you're pretty open about like everything, but what's something you wouldn't like normally bring up, but no, you probably should because it could help someone else?
Ooh. I feel a pretty large amount of self-hatred for myself. I'll be completely transparent about that. And I say this only because in the past when I've said it, people have gotten very irritated with me for saying this, and which is why I feel like I need to say it. I don't feel like I see myself clearly. I would never tell someone that I thought I was attractive or anything like that. I would never say that out loud because I don't really believe it. I feel like when I see myself, I see a very, 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 very different version of myself that is like all of the pain and all of the trauma and all of the experience all put into one sort of like gnarled being. And that's not how I present, you know, that's not what people see, and their first impression of me is not like, oh wow, he's been through some shit, but it's like, that's what I see, you know, I look and I see someone broken and someone hurting. And so over the years, like, when people have complimented me, I've had a lot of difficulty being like, thank you so much, like, it's always been a, no, like, I did all this, like, it's all the skincare, it's all, like, I blew dry my hair this morning, like, it's this and that, and, like, that can be humorous for a little while. It can be a sort of like sketch comedy thing where you're like laughing about it and it's whatever, but at the end of the day, if you realize that you truly cannot take a compliment, you truly do not know what it means to say, to see yourself clearly. And like, I feel like I've experienced a certain level of, and this is what I say, my friends get very frustrated at me for saying this because it's like, I know how they see me, but it's not how I see me, and that's the difficult thing to explain. And it's harder to change than just saying, well, you are, you know, like you look this way, you're handsome, or you have nice hair or nice teeth or whatever. It's like, okay, like that's your opinion of me. I still see the person like pre-Invisalign who had horrible teeth and who hit a growth spurt and sophomore year of high school and was like 120 pounds but 6'2" and looked like a skeleton. Like that's who I see, and it's been a really difficult thing to break out of that. And I think it's been a lot of force. It's been a lot of me forcing myself to see myself in a window or a mirror and just be like, okay, like I'm fine with that. Like I'm not gonna critique. I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna fix my hair. Like I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna see myself and be in that. And yeah, even saying it right now, it feels weird to say, but like I've met a lot of people who struggle with that, whether they are in great shape or whether they don't think that they're in great shape or whatever. Like everyone has some specific level of disgust with themselves physically. Like
Yeah.
I know I'm not alone in that, but it's been a hard thing to convey when people don't believe me, you know, when people don't believe that and people are like, you don't actually feel that way. I'm like, I really do. And they're like, well, you have no reason to. And I'm like, but I think I do.
Right.
You know, I think I have, if I say I have a reason to, then I do, you know. But yeah, I think that feels really important to say, like, even if you're viewed as being well off or attractive or beautiful or whatever, it's okay to still feel like anxious about that, and it's okay to still not be obsessed with yourself. Like confidence is really important, and confidence is an amazing thing to cultivate in your everyday life, but it's not an overnight thing, and it's not gonna you're not just gonna wake up and be like, okay, like I'm ready to take on the world. Like
Right.
it's a lot of time and it's a lot of effort, like breaking all of these thought patterns down. Like I am so hypercritical of myself in every aspect of my life, and it's made for like a very polished thing, but then it's like, damn it, now I'm so polished that like no one really thinks I'm
No one believes
real.
me.
Yeah, no one fucking believes me. Like that's exactly it. So I think like it's really important to lean into, to love the unpolished aspects of yourself as much as you love the polished aspects, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.